and welcome to the Chicago Southland International Film Festival, our final feature film showcase film and Q&A. We're fortunate to have David Glossberg with us, the director of Mustang Saviors, which you've all just had a chance to watch. And we also have Kevin Smith, director of Veterans Affairs at Governor State University. And we have Melanie Michalak, a dressage choreographer. I'll let them speak a little bit more about what they do and their connections with watching this film after I say a few words about the festival, and thank you for coming. I am the co-founder of the Chicago Southland International Film Festival, and myself and my co-founder Josh Young handpicked these films for this festival. So our feature film showcase is something we're very proud of, and we get super excited when we find films that we think are important and have to be in our festival, and Mustang Saviors definitely fit that bill. So thank you, David, for allowing us to screen your film at our festival. We are honored to have your film, and I absolutely love the film, and I can speak for Josh as well. We got on email and started chatting about, we have to have this movie. We hope he says yes, and you did. So thank you. In this Q&A, we're going to talk about a few things. I mostly like to talk about film, so I have a lot of questions about the process. And then Melanie and Kevin have their level of expertise, which obviously helped them possibly be moved in a different way by the film. But I do think your film is universal in how it can touch and move people, and so important. And so many people need to see this film to know what you guys are doing. You know, what the people at Braveheart are doing, these wonderful vets that we meet at Braveheart. You know, from the generational guys who didn't experience the same thing, but never can unsee the same things. Love that. You know, from them to Jenny and Mary, women that I would otherwise probably never meet in my life, who I felt so close to watching their story. And to see the smile on Mary's face at the end of the film in a shot where we finally see her smiling was the greatest thing, I thought. I love that. So just my first impression right there. I would like to open up to the introductions and have Melanie and Kevin talk a little bit about their connections to veterans and horses a little better than I can. So Kevin is our Director of Veterans Affairs at Governor State University and also wears many other hats. So Kevin, will you please say a few words about yourself and your impressions of the film?
Yep. Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome everybody, and it's an honor to be on the Q&A panel this afternoon. So I've been at Governor State now as a student and as an employee about 10 years. I took over Director for Veterans Affairs about 6 years ago. During that tenure, I also was co-chair for the Illinois Joining Forces Board of Directors for 2 years. And we actually had interactions with Bravehearts and supporting Illinois veterans and other non-for-profits around the state of Illinois. In that capacity, I was able to see and work with a lot of non-for-profits that we have in Illinois that are working to make the lives more fulfilling and better for our veterans and for their family members. And this film, I thought, did a marvelous job of exposing some of the past mistakes that we've made, some of the current things that we're doing now, and even looking at maybe some possible future ideas of how we can treat our veterans and our veteran family better and more effectively, and the parallels between the Mustangs and how the government treats them and all the things that we do, and then you look at how we've treated and how we hurt our veterans and our military members and train them and strip them away from their families. Like, all those things ran through my mind. So there's a lot of speaking points that I think we can touch during this Q&A. So.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, I felt the same. Lots to unpack in this movie, actually, really. You cover a lot of aspects in this film. Well done. Melanie, if you could just say a little bit more about your work with dressage choreography and your impressions of the film.
Okay. I've been working with horses pretty much my whole life, and professionally choreographing for them for the Olympics and for the World Cup and the Pan Am Games for the last 32 years. When I watched this film, the segment about, I'm going to start again. The segment about the roundup of the horses just made me weep. I know that these horses have families and that they are dependent on one another and that their bonds are enormous and unbreakable. And to see what the government did to them, the horses are flight animals, they're fearful, and to bring in a helicopter to round them up is just heartbreaking. They can die from this, they can drop dead right there, they can have permanent traumatic injury. And I kept juxtaposing that vision with the war footage in the film and thinking about the helicopters coming in and picking up the wounded. And these horses are as wounded as these veterans are. And I've worked with veterans and in other over the years and choreographed for veterans organizations with horses. And I mean, the connection is impossible to explain. There's an old saying that the outside of the horse is good for the inside of a man, and it certainly is applicable here. There's nothing more viscerally inexplicable but powerful than feeling the heartbeat of the horse next to you. And when the one person was gentling the horse with her own heartbeat, it's like with a baby, and you don't think that because they weigh 800 to 1,500 pounds, and you just don't realize how incredibly sensitive that they are. So I was incredibly moved by this film.
Thank you, Melanie. And so, David, you mentioned that Bravehearts came to you, and I think when we watched the film, it seems that you found them. I mean,
when I say they, our conversation, it wasn't that they came to me, that this project came to me, so to speak. I didn't seek them out at all. I gave a friend a ride to their facility who asked if I could give him a ride.
Wow.
And when I got out of the car, I met the president, who quickly, when I told her I'm in television and film production, you should do a documentary about this. And that was as quickly as it happened. And that seed sprouted over a few days after taking a tour of the facility, learning where I was, and tying into something I had said in my mind, really literally, when I heard there's a suicide rate of 20 or 22 a day of veterans, I was touched by that and made aware through different perspectives of life, and the topic of suicide had been brought to me as a really just something that touched me. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but there's a connection to that brought me into Bravehearts and to meet these people and to see what they were doing. And when I learned this, I said, yes, I should make a documentary about this.
Yeah,
so that's the story behind that.
Anybody who would take a walk around that ranch and see what's there and what they're doing, or even I think a tour by Megan, it would be hard to not be impressed. She was really impressive. Patty, he was great to meet. I mean, it was wonderful how you showcased all these different people who told their different stories, all with this common love and this common bond, and different ways that they came, to have this commonality. So I noticed that you are the cinematographer of the film, right? So you photographed most of it except for the drone stuff, right? And
right.
Still photography. So how was that, photographing these horses? I mean, some of the most beautiful shots that brought me to tears. I just want to freeze frame. So
I followed the path. I followed my promptings. I did hire a camera and a sound guy for our first day of interviewing. And from that, found how to make the film by hiring somebody else for a little while until finally nobody was available with a camera. I ended up borrowing one for the day, going out there filming, and then found that I should buy a camera, and I did. And I bought camera and lenses and started to do the filming myself after a handful of different shooting days that finally, every single interview after a certain point, I was the camera operator and sound guy, and it was a very, very big lesson in plate spinning and juggling. So,
Yeah, and
and
often,
I learned the biggest lesson is that you get what you're supposed to get. My thought of what I was going to get or supposed to get versus what I actually got were two different things. And I had to just learn that what I got was what I was supposed to get, and that every component I got was supposed to be there. And the things that I thought I was supposed to have just obviously weren't part of it. So that was a big
yeah, I
lesson
can
there.
imagine it would be tough in the editing room, who to keep in, what to keep in. But I think that's where the film really comes together, the way this film is edited. And I believe that wasn't you have a writer of the film actually who wrote,
Well,
right?
Kirk Demarest,
Kirk
who is a fantastic editor, did the script.
That's
So
what I thought.
he wrote the narration script, so that's why he's writer in the credit. And he coordinated some of the music too, the transitional music. So he produced part of this as well. I was very fortunate to find Kirk.
Yeah, I
and
wondered how
to
did you
have him
meet
be part of
Kirk?
the project. What's
Yeah,
that?
I wondered how you did meet with Kirk Demarest because he just came off of doing this Academy nominated film, Crow, the Legend, right? So,
I don't know if that's the same, but
Oh.
if it is, then. But I have a friend that's in production who, when I go to LA, I reach out to friends, and I was at the Agape International Spiritual Center because that's where I go on my Sundays, and I reached out to somebody, Mike Harrigan, who's a producer, and he asked if we met for coffee, and during that walk we had along the beach in Santa Monica, do I have an editor? I have one for you. And so he introduced me to Kirk, and that right there was a conversation with Kirk I had a couple hours later, at the end of which I decided I'm sending him the drives, and he took in the film and logged it all. And without him, I just say this film would not be the same. So Kirk Demarest gets a lot of credit for arranging this film the way he did, with his expertise and his skill set to bring us this product. So he and I, made this. And then I also, because of Agape, the Spiritual Center, the narrator, in fact, reads the announcements sometimes at the Sunday services. And one day when I was thinking who I could have narrate this, I've never met her. Her name popped in my head, and I reached out to this place, and they put me in touch with her, and she was thrilled to be part of it. And she has a whole story beyond who she is. And so for her to be part of this is really special for me too. So
the narration was really good. I mean, it was clear, but it was also empathic. And when I was listening, though, the first 10 minutes of the film, I'm thinking, oh, this is Susan Stamberg. She's just someone I hear on the radio, a famous narrator on NPR once in a while. She's out of New York. And then I slowly realized, no, this is not Susan Stamberg. And then I looked up that you had found, I think, is her name Akuye Graham?
Akuyo Graham.
Akuyo Graham. Yeah,
Graham.
wonderfully narrated. She did a marvelous job of having us really get the thread of the stories, the several stories that were going on. Of course, the big division between the way the Mustangs are captured, the federal government sort of piece of the story, and then the real side of it with Megan and Bravehearts and what they're doing. So I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to move off to Kevin and Melanie and let them ask a couple before we open it up to everyone else. So Kevin, Melanie, anything you'd like to start off with?
Where did you find the chief at the beginning? Because
okay,
that's really powerful, since the horse is such a spiritual part of Native American life.
Well, after shooting for a while, I was asked by Megan, do I want to come to New York City to film them riding this trail to zero? And she asked me on a Thursday, and it was Saturday. And I ended up rapping on the bridge on LaSalle Street on a movie I was working on at 1 a.m, and did my paperwork. And at 5 a.m, I was on a flight to New York, and I ended up I caught up to them halfway through the ride at Ground Zero, and then I followed them and jumped in a police truck and filmed them coming into Central Park at the end. And after the ride, I met a horse carriage driver through Bill Mercurio and Nancy Mercurio. At the end of the ride, we all had dinner, and then they took a carriage ride with Ariel Fincy. And Ariel gave me a ride home on the carriage. And when he did, he put me on the phone with Chief Philip White Jr. And I talked to him, and Chief is very, he has a very strong horse background, performing and doing many different things with horses. And he kept mentioning spirit and the spirit of the veterans, etc., and why the horse was so important in this. And he loved the concept of what I was doing. And we talked maybe a couple times, no, not true. Ariel and I talked a couple times over the year. And then when I went back the next year to film, then do the next year ride in New York, I reached out to Ariel. And again, I took a horse carriage ride with him, this time around Central Park. He had people in the back. He put me on the phone again with Chief. So he connected me with Chief Philip. And because of that, leaving New York, I realized maybe I should interview this chief. So I booked a trip to Bozeman, Montana, and drove to Lame Deer, Montana, and spent the night and met Chief Philip. And what an experience I had just visiting with him. And we spent the day together on Saturday. And then Sunday morning I went and I got to film him at his house, at his land.
That was so powerful. And, you know, with Native Americans, when they work with a horse and take it from the wild or from their own herds, they are always mindful of the fact that the spirit of the horse is such an integral part of the spirit world. And so it's very important to them. I work with a lot of Native Americans in different tribes in Arizona and in Oklahoma. And so I noticed that he was Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne. So it was really powerful for me.
Thank you. I really am happy that, and truth be told, at the end of the interview, we had actually done a sweat in his sweat lodge the day before. And he was chanting and singing and we were praying, etc. And so after that, then the next day came when I had finished asking him all these questions I thought I should be asking him, etc. He got up. We were almost done. He was taking the microphone off. And I said, would you mind giving us a song? And after a few moments, he sat back down and he sang that song.
Wow.
And that's what we used. And Kirk surprised me to open and close with that song, which was very moving and touching. And I'm very happy that he got to include it. The interview we actually did with him wasn't quite able to weave into the narrative of the story. And so,
but the spirit of the song did.
But that's why I ended up going that weekend, and
set the tone.
Thank you for noticing it. It really is special to me too.
It got to me right away. Of course, did.
And when I look at film, I look a lot at the bookends, the opening and the closing. Openings are often great, but sometimes people have trouble ending their films. And I just thought using that as a bookend, because something that ran through the whole film is a message of peace, really, peace in our own inner selves, peace in the world, peace for the horses and man. And so to open and close that way, he made a brilliant decision. I think it just absolutely packages the film perfectly. And it's very moving. I'm filled with tears at the opening and I'm filled with tears at the end. So
it elevated the message into a different level of spirituality for me.
Thank you.
Yep. Kevin, I know we're chattering away.
Yeah, so Dave, a couple of things struck me. The one thing that I really wanted to ask you, I know when you do a documentary like this, you have a plan, right? You have your things kind of laid out. So what I thought was interesting is when you started disclosing the path of the veteran and then started paralleling the path of the Mustang, right? And they came to this PTSD for the horse and for the veteran, right? I was like, wow, how did we get there? Was that a planned maneuver throughout that, or was that a discovered? And if with discovered, was there any others in the movie that just kind of set you back and like, wow, I didn't see that one coming while you were making the movie?
I had no plan. Okay, I'll just tell you that. No, not true. When I was given you should, it brewed in me, and I considered what I wanted. And when I was shooting and when I was interviewing people, my focus was the past, present, and future of the horses, the veterans, and the program. And that's what I kept hitting on, and that's what I stayed with. And that doesn't necessarily come out in all the narrative, but that was my focal question cluster of what are we doing here? And that was helping me at least stay on track. We actually edited the film and had it run at a film festival, and I realized that I had left out the voices of the horse advocates. So we have a whole different version of this film that we went back and cut out, and I interviewed 4 more people. And then we added that side to it. And that drew out the trauma that the horses go through, because otherwise it wasn't in the film. So I discovered a few different things, but no, there wasn't necessarily a plan to, I didn't know that would overlap, but that was a discovery. And Kirk laid that out in that I told him what I wanted to tell as far as the story goes. And I had it outlined into a certain 3 different categories and 3 different categories within those. But when I gave it to him, he constructed it in his way that brought that out even more. So that was a discovery.
Wow.
And just a follow-up to that, did you and your whole team, did you find it difficult to get the veterans to talk about their experiences? Did you find that they were reluctant at first, and how long did it take before they really felt comfortable with the team?
The first set of interviews, they're wearing the brave hearts, and those are those, you'll if you think about it, those are those shots where they're at the farm. And those, I had met a couple of the veterans at my visit, the Mitchells. I had met Mitchell Reno and Mitchell Headland. And so they had shared with me a certain amount of their past, and we had become friendly through the few hours that I was at the facility. I ended up actually getting into a round pen that day. I was asked, do I want to go in the round pen? And I didn't really, a Mustang before then was a car in my consciousness. I didn't know a Mustang really was a wild horse. Like, that's my admission to being so green in this case. So after showing up again and again and again, there's that guy, crazy guy. They really didn't know what I was doing. I was this guy with a camera, and they didn't know what was coming out of my work yet. So for me to keep showing up, though, every time I did, it built rapport. Every time I was with them in a certain different environment, we built more trust. And then a year later, I did those follow-up interviews. And I think that's when more of the personal stuff came out. Jenny's interview, I went and followed up with Mary actually in California. She moved out there. So that took a while, I think, to develop trust and for them to be able to share certain elements with me. Right. So it wasn't just over, it wasn't instant. It was me continuing to show up, and we became friendly. And now I'm friends with some of these people on offline. And so it was a relationship that got built over time, and the trust that got built over time.
So it kind of worked exactly the same way as the relationship of a Mustang with his person. Exactly.
Yeah.
The same.
We had moments of testing each other and
Exactly.
and just, yes. So yes, it paralleled well. You're right.
And David, did you ever get on a horse? Did you ever get on a Mustang and ride?
I did a few times. There was Cheyenne Frontier Days. I ended up doing a ride around the facility on one of the older horses they had there. And at the end of that, we unsaddled the horses, and I got on a bareback Mustang and just walked around the stables, just let him do whatever. And after that, a few more times, I was able to, some of those shots that you have in the film where you see the brand of the Mustang, that's me riding the horse with the shot. So I did get a chance to. In Lima Zulu, I did ride her and bareback, and I did slip off and fall too. So we don't have a video of that, but too bad. So I did get on a horse a few times, and these are just so special. And I would go visit Booyah and just hang out and sit around the the pen and tear grass off and not necessarily even look. And he would come over and finally after a while would eat the hay or the grass. And so it was a really strong experience for me to go from not knowing what a Mustang is to learning how valuable and special these horses are. And then to go and film a roundup, it really, that also moved me. And I weep when I see it, and I still, but driving into that valley, there's a shot in the film where you have these deer or whatever they are running, and there's two horses in that. And that was my first ever seeing a wild horse. And I was driving as I'm getting that shot. And Kirk was able to use it, thank goodness, because a lot of my shots are shaky. So to learn what a Mustang was through this process and to get to ride it and to get an understanding of how special they are was a really very powerful experience for me that moved me in a new way.
Well, you know,
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, Suzanne, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll follow
I was
up.
just going to say that there, just a little over 100 years ago, there were 2 million of these horses. And now there are less than 25,000. And to see their suffering was really profound to me. And you talked about the brand, and that Freeze brand is so parallel to how the veterans suffer, because that's never going to go away. And it's a visible scar of what they've experienced. And maybe we may not be able to see the visible scars of the veterans. Sometimes we can, but certainly the impact of the trauma is something that just kept coming through. And I mean, the shots in New York City, seeing the horses with their brands, every time I see that Freeze brand, it reminds me that what they're doing to these horses through the BLM is such a travesty in so many ways. I mean, it's great when they're lucky enough to be given the opportunity to help the veterans, and I think it's fabulous. But it's really, you know, the term Mustang comes from the Spanish word meaning running free. And when you think about that, it's just so impactful, you know.
Did you have to get permission to film a roundup, or could you just show up?
I met with a BLM agent and followed them out. It was a caravan. There was somebody else there, Laura Lee, who I met, who runs Wild Horse Education, was also there documenting the roundup. And we visited the roundup. This is way out in the middle of nowhere, frankly. So I made arrangements, and through their PR department was introduced to Jenny and met her at 5 a.m. And we all drove in. Sun was rising, and an hour, a couple hour drive to go from where we were into Ely into this remote area. So it was coordinated meeting up with them. Yes.
And I do think that it was very important that you ended up including the wildlife conservationists, because I think as a movie, without that piece, many of us would have had questions watching the movie. We would have had to say, wait a second, like, who's talking about that? Somebody's saying something about that. There must be another side. So I thought it was very fair the way you let them say what they say, especially the gentleman who basically says they belong here. Nobody should be taking them anywhere. And regardless of how well they're working with vets, he was like, no, they stay here. And so I found that, very honest that you let that happen in the film, because we're obviously very connected to the idea of helping the vets. And then, of course, the help for the Mustang comes out of the fact that they've been rounded up. So, it's a cause and effect. But I really thought that was important, and I'm glad that you had that in there. And it was tough. It was tough to hear, because we have to kind of agree with them in a little way. But then we also love to see what Bravehearts is doing, and to meet the veterans and hear what they say happens to them when they meet these horses. So yeah, I think it's good that got in the film. That was important. Yeah.
It's a big source of controversy in the horse industry, for sure.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I never knew hardly anything about that. Your film opened up quite a bit for me in terms of roundups and branding. I'd heard about equine therapy, obviously the stats on PTSD and suicides amongst our vets. I'm aware of all of that. I'm always championing films and documentaries and books that, talk about these things. but the horses, I've never really ridden a horse. I love them. I find them majestic. I think I'm just a little bit intimidated. And here's the thing, I'm small, I'm tiny, but that doesn't matter because jockeys, right? They're tiny people. So I always think that why was my fear of being around horses because I was so tiny when it isn't about that, right? Um, I saw in this film that yes, these gentle giants, they're huge, but um, and I loved when the guy said, this horse could do serious damage to me. And you need to know that. And I think that's what I'm scared to even go in a ring with a horse. And they would sense that, oh, here's someone who's scared, right? So I have all those weird myths in my head. But your film, and sometimes seeing some of the things that you post on Facebook, Melanie, has made me think that I might need a little bit of horse therapy in my life. So, Melanie, we're going to talk about that offline sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've
Yeah.
worked with blind riders, riders that have no use of their hands.
Wow.
Have worked with quadriplegics, and it's very not only emotionally is it a very powerful thing, but physically, the movement of the pelvis of a horse is the closest to the movement of our bodies. That's why you can put people with huge physical disabilities or challenges, I should say, like spasmodic disease, muscular dystrophy, brain injury. You can put them on these horses, and for reasons that nobody really understands, the bodies of the riders somehow lock in tune with the bodies of the horse. It's a very mystical thing.
Wow. Yeah. And I like that the film shows that Megan works with the disabled kids, right? And that was very moving to see the work that she did. It was just a short piece of the film, but she was just an amazing person. I mean, such drive, you can see it in her face.
That's a whole other side of Bravehearts. They have the largest cost-free veteran therapy program, but they also have a whole other side of, which is a lot of what they do, which is the hippo and the equine therapy for different
Right.
children, etc. So that is still ongoing. She came from that background and then started to work with Bravehearts and then learned all about the working with the veteran part. So yes, Bravehearts has both of that though within their services, is not just for veterans. So
And it's really quite wonderful when
special
we found
place.
out that it was just outside of Chicago. I think that was another thing that Josh and I, when we looked at the film, our theme with the feature film showcase is to try to celebrate independent local filmmakers. So we were thinking, this is too good to be true. This really exists outside of Chicago. So we were excited to learn that. And in your film, obviously sharing to our local community here. And of course, many other people viewing the film, but that exists out here. So another great win-win on the film there.
Well, I'm going to go out there and see their operation because my horse lives not too far from there. So I'm going to make sure I stop by because I was so impressed with the really good horsemanship in addition to the, I mean, it came across, you did a really good job of bringing out that these are people who are responsible, they are ethical, and treatment of these animals and the vets was just wonderful. And I saw the care. I mean, this is what I do for a living. I know what those horses can look like in a lot of these programs, and I was really impressed.
They have beautiful, very healthy horses at
Yes,
Braveheart.
they do.
Yeah, very special.
Kevin, would you like to add anything before we open it up to our audience?
Yeah, just one thing, and I get this because we deal with at the university. We handle approximately 400 student veterans that attend the university, and so we see from all the different branches and the different decades of serving. And one thing I thought that David that came out of the movie that I thought was just it was brilliant. You talked about you're showing how you have to earn the trust of the Mustang so they can follow that leader, right? And within the veteran community, I see this in so many different levels, whether it's Vietnam era, Korea, modern day, Desert Storm, that we're not always, as veterans, we're not ready to just trust right up front. we'll trust when we kind of go through our little mental thing, and of course we want to verify. We do look for that battle buddy, that fellow veteran, where we can connect. But I thought when you ran that parallel between the Mustangs and between the veterans, that hit on so many different marks that I know, just as being a veteran myself, that you touched a lot of veterans within the moment of that movie. So
Thank you. That was a lot of the purpose behind it, is to, now I'd like this to integrate within the veteran community, and anybody that knows anybody, maybe that, especially these last handful of months, that is detached and that is withdrawn and that is secluded, and that this is something to start the conversation and ask somebody, are you okay? How's everything? Do you want to get out? And invite them into that environment of getting out of their house first off. And then if they can get to a place like this, it saved lives. And I've met so many who keep saying that without this, what else would we do? That just gets, it's repeated through the film. And yeah, I think it's very important.
Have you been submitting to other festivals and getting into?
I submitted in the beginning of the year to several handfuls of festivals. So I did that earlier in the year. We were selected, and still there are some that'll show it. We've had very good reception with the film earlier in the year, different best documentaries, inspiring, and lots of great reception for the film. At this point, we're no longer entering festivals, and I'm looking forward to being able to announce, once I can figure out exactly the details of how it will come out, that the film will be available into the larger market of the video on demand world that exists beyond festivals. So
it definitely belongs.
Our festival run will be ending at the end of the different ones I've submitted, and I hope to share news soon enough to make it an official announcement that this will go beyond festivals.
That's great, because there are many people I would like to recommend it to.
Oh yeah, and I think that these streaming platforms that are also prevalent right now, that everybody's kind of using at home, I would think they would be clamoring to get your film. So good luck with that. I think we need to open up now to our audience. If Jake has any questions on the chat.
Yeah, I think guys, great discussion. But yeah, let's open it up to the audience right now. Our first question is for David, and he wants to know, what was the first feature film that you directed?
Mustang Saviors.
Yeah.
Oh, this was the first one. Okay.
This is a first work of mine. I've been in film production as a crew member behind the scenes, as a vendor for the last 15 years. And 4 years ago, I was invited into the union. And I think because of that, and then getting out of the car saying I'm in film and production, this was thrown at me. It was just time. It was ready. And this is my first film I've made, besides a few short 5-minute films in film school in a 6-week class I took in 2011. So Mustang Saviors. Thank you.
Okay. Our next question, maybe the whole panel can discuss it. Has there been any developments in BLM policies regarding Mustangs recently?
There have been changes over time in the way they're managing it. I thought Dave did a really good job of mentioning how they are sterilizing some of the horses to reduce the impact on the natural environment. There was a huge amount of controversy because these horses have roamed wild, mostly in Nevada. That seems to be the area where they're located primarily, the largest group of them. But the roundups, there's more and more awareness of how these are being conducted. And years ago, one of my friends adopted one of the first Mustangs off of these roundups, and they had very strict rules that didn't make any sense to any of us who were horsemen. You had to have small round pens so that the Mustangs could not get up a head of steam, and the walls had to be 6 feet tall without any way for them to see through. These were really unkind and cruel restrictions that were put on these horses, and now these have eased a lot. And you could see in the film the horses grazing in open pens and in much more natural environments. But the BLM is a constant source of controversy, and the more there was a gentleman that spoke as a horse trainer about the difference between breaking a horse and gentling a horse. And the concept of breaking a horse is really contrary to many disciplines. It's more in line with these horses that were wild, that were used for ranch work and things like that. And all of these training methods have been out of vogue for maybe 40 years. And so the kindness to the animal is paramount. But to get the government to respond to that, and to get ranchers who want that grazing land for their cattle to understand that they have to share is a whole different ballgame. So there hasn't been that much progression. I did some research on this, that in 2011 and 12, the BLM rules, I actually are written down here. The first laws regarding them was because of the mass slaughter in 1971. And then the BLM did do some adjustment over time, but in 2001, they had a 50% budget increase to increase the removal of these horses. And removal is the kindest word that I can use. So there hasn't been anything much done since that time. The only thing that's really happening positively is that these horses are being used in a really positive way for riding, for ranch use, for especially these veterans programs. I mean, I think this is a wonderful thing. I train show horses, and these are very small animals, but their purpose is not the same. And they should be treated with the same grace and gentleness, because they respond to kindness, just like we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that in the film. I mean, even in the shots that you got, or the stories of when someone's crying and that horse just squeezes your neck. I mean, gosh, I can't imagine that feeling. That seems like it would be a spiritual epiphany, actually, if that happened to me. So, but thank you for that, Melanie. That was a great answer.
Well, I really, after watching this film, I really wanted to find out more about it. And I did a lot of research, and I was very dismayed to find that the policies have not been updated to have more empathy for the animals, but also these are a resource for this country, and they should be treated as such in terms of just viewing them in the wild, the way other countries have learned to use their natural beauty for tourism, to the actual practicality of it, and the wonderful work that a horse can do to bring out the soul of a person.
Wow, that's wonderful. Our next question comes from Goming Siu, who had his featured film Repossession premiere on Friday night. And he was wondering, were there any subplots that you found fascinating that had to be cut out for time or focus? And if so, could you elaborate?
Any subplots that got cut out? I did a handful of the follow-up interviews, and they didn't necessarily make it in. I don't necessarily have anything that pops up that says, oh, I had to cut this out though. So I gave Kirk all of the footage and left it up to him. Once I gave him the story I was seeking to tell with the footage I gave him, I trusted him to give it back. So for him to choose some of the different interviews and not to use them for whatever reasons he chose, I didn't become aware of it enough to tell you the answer that we lost this or anything like that. So like I did say though, the full interview of the chief wasn't included in the film because it didn't include in the dialogue. So, but he talked a lot more about spirit and the connection and the history of the horse, etc. But it just, again, so there were parts of those interviews that didn't make it, but nothing I said, oh, I really want to tell this. I wanted a 90-minute film. And when we first did the edit that I had mentioned, it was very close to 90 minutes. And then when we added those 4 interviews, that put 10 more minutes in, and we reduced some of the other interviews that we had in order to make that narrative work. So we ended up adding more, truth be told, because I left out that side of the story that there are horse advocates. There are people that believe we shouldn't be doing these roundups. And I felt that was a big portion that I needed to express. So that evolved the film, that morphed it, that did change the narrative of it. So that might answer your question, a roundabout way.
And I'll just add that with your subjects, I watch a lot of documentaries. I love documentary film. And we get engaged with a subject. We get to know a subject. And oftentimes in a film, we might say, oh, I wanted more of that person, or I wanted more of that guy, or how come that guy never showed up again? And I didn't get that in your film. I felt like, what's his name? Kirk did an amazing job with taking that footage and giving us a well-rounded and full circle on not only the subjects that we met, but the horses too, because we got to keep re-meeting these horses, keep going back to Mary brushing the horse and showing us how much they loved it. Made me want to go and learn how to brush a horse. So
Thank you.
yeah, it was absolutely just beautiful. So I think he did a magnificent job with, I can just imagine the loads of footage that you had in sort of 5 different categories, right? And then he has to weave that together. So I felt that I didn't feel like I missed anybody. If you had not included the shot of Mary smiling at the end, I would have said, what's up with Mary? Is she okay? But because you gave us that, I felt so good for Mary. So
I thought that it was such a balanced portrayal of the horses in the like you said, the people that are the advocates, as well as those that are training these horses, the people that were involved with the program, and the horses themselves. And I just loved Booyah. I just got to say that I think that was a miraculous recovery. And that was just, it made me tear up also.
If you didn't have a subplot, Dave, you could actually do a miniseries on Cowboy.
Yeah.
He's a character, that one. He is yep. I love him.
Thanks for that question from Ming Su. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question, on the flip side of the previous question, the sequence about theater and other forms of art as therapy seemed a bit tangential. Did you feel pressure to include as many possible forms of therapy to promote them to your veteran audience?
When I met Shep Crumrine, we visited the facility, and because his background is actually art therapy and music therapy, and he is in charge of recreational therapy, and recreational therapy is the umbrella that this equine therapy falls under. So because of our visit to the VA facility, we saw the stage where they perform, and we saw the art facility. So there are a few shots of that. I think it was to explain that it came from that angle of this is where this comes from. Kirk included the musical section. He created more depth out of that. And when he mentions when Shep mentions the Shakespeare program, and actually some of the veterans that are in the horse program are also in the Shakespeare program, and told me the value of it after the fact, after I made the edit, and we were at a party, and he was telling me he doesn't have a speaking role in this, but Michael Sullivan is at the end. No, not true. He does have a blurb at the end when he says that everybody made it through and he'll remember this for the rest of his life. He is in the Shakespeare with Veterans program. So I didn't think to add it. It just came into it, I think, if that helps answer the question.
Yeah. And then our next question is, since you started producing this film, have you seen any increased participation and expansion of equine therapy for veterans?
I've become more aware of the different programs that are out there. And when I mention what it is I've been doing, that some people tell me, oh, I know of a place, etc. I did meet the executive director of something called the All Glory Project, and they on a larger scale, and they actually support Brave Hearts, but they also support all across the country different programs with equine and canine therapy for first responders and veterans. So they support groups throughout the country from that platform. So I learned there are more. Has it increased? I don't know yet. I'd love this film to be part of the conversation that would help it increase. There's a scene where Ken Boyd mentions that they had actually visited, when they did the ride in Washington, D.C., they visited a senator and got really up and said, this needs to be a priority, equine therapy for veterans. So they're pushing on it from their end. I'd like this film to work in the broader community for people to say, well, I support this and this together. What will it take for us as a community, as a society, to invest in making, since we're spending money on the veterans already and certain things, we're spending money on our horses to keep them, why not join the two together and really develop this as a bigger program and project and intention for all of us to talk about putting our veterans with our wild horses, because they are everybody's. And I'd like this to be part of a spark to help the conversation.
Right. It's very good.
And if I can add to that, I think, this is the challenge that we have in the veterans community, is that just in Illinois, for example, we have over 3,000 not-for-profits that help with veterans, and it's growing every day. It's experienced throughout other states throughout the country, and there's a sea of goodwill. There's just so many people and so many organizations that want to do good. How do you get the message across? Like, how do we talk about equine therapy? How do we bring the things to the front? So, like in Illinois joining forces is one of those arms, right? Other states are trying to do the same thing, and the VA challenges with that, has a big challenge with that, because there's just so much information to get out there. But I'm telling you, with some of the avenues that have been developed over the years now, especially with Illinois and the Midwest, and even with the VA, there's going to be an easier path to get this movie out there and to get the word out there to veterans. But it's a daily challenge within the veteran community to get the information that's so helpful to the person that needs that help. We work on it every day.
That's great. And Kevin, while I have you on the spotlight, the next question is directed for you. So one of the most poignant comments in the entire film was when someone said that the equivalent of a small commercial plane crash worth of veteran suicides happens each week. Are there any policies or bills that our audience can write our Congress to and support to help our combat veterans?
Great question, and I have chills now that you just referenced that in the question, because I got that during the movie also. I've always believed if you can bring an issue to the forefront that really hits in front of you like that, and you talk about that, you say if we have one plane crash a week, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. I mean, that would not be a valid question, because it would probably would have been addressed. So that was a great example of the seriousness of this. I do know several of my veteran friends that have lost fellow veterans, veterans that were siblings that have taken their own life. And within my tenure of Illinois joining forces, we always talked about that. Legislation, okay, so the VA has stepped up in the last 3 years. They have increased funding. There's a new, if you will, heartbeat going on within the veteran community to train and work within the counselors. Our vocational rehab side of the VA for the federal got a big shot in the arm in funding just a couple of years ago, and they're increasing the counselors in all the areas. For example, Los Angeles had a huge counselor deficit, and they were able to receive additional federal funding, and I believe they've increased folk rehab counselors for VA and for veterans by 30 to 40%. There was a lot of vacancies. So there are actions that are going on, but we need more. And so the only way, I think we'll go back to the person who asked, I'll address the person who asked the question, that if you want to do something, yes, please get involved in the process. Contact your congressman, contact your senator, and let them know that, that yes, we're making progress, but we have a long way to go. And there are good programs out there. The fact that in Illinois there's a 1-800 number that they can call. They can call the VA, they can call Illinois Joining Forces, they can call other organizations. It's becoming more readily available. The problem that we do run in with veteran suicide is when a veteran gets in that dark place, it's not like they can just flip up their laptop and go online or flip up their cell phone and go in a corner and make a phone call. They get to a point where they don't have that available, or they don't want to be connected, right? So how do we monitor and how do we reach out to those veterans that have really started disassociating themselves within social media, cell phones, all normal technology, all current technology? And that's the challenge that we have. So that's where we need the eyes and the ears of the community, because the community can help and reach out to a veteran, and then the community needs to know where to go. Because a lot of times when a veteran gets in that dark corner, they're not going to reach out. They're not going to ask for help. We were trained not to ask for help. We're going to figure it out, right? We're going to get the job done. Well, that can be your detriment down the road. So if you can train the community, if you can educate the community and the family members to know where to go, we can make huge inroads in reducing those numbers.
Yeah, like the gentleman in the film who knew his friend was basically just going to hunker down in the basement. And so
Right.
he got him and told him, come out and see this. So
Yep.
yeah, that's great. And I feel like your film can be that kind of catalyst to get
Yep.
people out of their basement or their home or that
We're
corner.
hoping. It's a start, it's a spark, it's a communication, and then maybe somebody will gift them the movie. They'll see the movie and then become curious. Like Mary, she wasn't ready. Her mother forced her in the car and
Yeah.
said, "You're coming," and drove out there, and she didn't want to go. She was all withdrawn, and then finally you heard it was the touch of the horse, and then the conversation with Megan, and then the curiosity, oh, maybe I should go back there, that horse, and so but that needed to happen. Her mother, I think, flew from California to Chicago, and got like that needed to happen. So hopefully this will be a trail, a breadcrumb to that ending where people are out in the world, where they're engaging again and can pass from their pain through it to the wisdom passed into what their next phase of life will be, and their new purpose beyond being that veteran that ...
I think it's important that your film emphasized that you can get through it, because maybe not everybody, but the one thing that really got me was near the end of the film in Central Park, where the one writer said that, her father was a veteran and he committed suicide, and her brother committed suicide, and she had 15 friends that committed suicide. I mean, that is beyond overwhelming. I mean, if that is your normal, then how do you claw your way out? You need to have help to do that. And the fact that she looked well, or looked actively involved in her life, actively involved with these horses, that the horses helped her to overcome what may have been overwhelming to even think about overcoming. I thought that just really touched me.
Yeah, I think you can tell Mary and Jenny and the rest of them that, we all feel like so like touched by them. I feel, as a girl, I'm like, oh, Mary and Jenny, are they okay? I would like to think that Mary's okay and that she's come out and that she's flourished, by having this relationship with the horses. It seemed a natural fit for her, and Jenny too. So give our regards to all of the people in the film, because I think we felt like we got to know them while we watched the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Jake?
Wonderful.
Anything else we got? I know we have a couple minutes.
We have one question right now for you, Suzanne. What was your initial attraction to this film and your selection process to be included in the film festival?
Well,
And
during,
how did you guys find it?
well, that's the thing, Josh and I are constantly just scoping, looking out, sort of trolling sites or looking whatever comes our way. Sometimes it's something we find, sometimes it's something that comes our way. And for your film, it was actually because we were using filmfreeway.com for our short film competition. So all the short film submissions are coming in from there. And Film Freeway were sort of showing us, hey, here's some features that you might be interested in. And yours came popping up. And we grabbed that email and we were both thinking the same thing. And it was just basically one little note to each other of, we need to ask David if we can have this movie. So that kind of how that happened. It kind of came to us via Film Freeway, but it always happens differently. It's a serendipitous process. We love it. And it's exciting when the film arrives that we know is the one that we want. And then that's sometimes before we've even screened it, just your trailer. We knew this was important. Then we have to actually see it. So we have to ask for the screener. And then when we see it, we're even more impressed. And then there's the hope that the director will want to come on board. So this was easy this year. We were surrounded by a plethora of lovely films. And one was a horror, crazy thriller that was so exciting and made me sleep with my light on for 3 nights. And then the other 2 are 2 documentaries, very different, but very similar in being about land and people and survival and therapy and whatever it takes to get through your work and your life. I don't know, David, if you got a chance to see Seasons of Change on Henry's Farm, but Inez is a Chicago filmmaker as well. And so we look as our 2 locals, right? Our local filmmakers, and so thrilled to be able to showcase your pieces that talk about things happening right here in the Chicagoland area. So congratulations again. We're thrilled.
Thank you. The honor to be part of it and to have it be selected. It really is rewarding, and I thank you for noticing it and picking it and reaching out. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be part of your festival.
Well, we would love to help you put some legs on the film and see where we can help it go. So I think Melanie and Kevin and I will definitely work on that. Anything else, Jake?
I think we got one last question. And this one's for David. Are you working on any new projects currently?
I am getting this film ready to get out into the bigger world beyond festival. Other than that, I've got things that are brewing, let's say, and when the next thing that's supposed to pop out and hit the ground and become a project is supposed to have, supposed to be out into that next phase, I'll run with it. I'm thinking about stuff. People are asking me, so nothing solid, nothing concrete. A lot of ideas though, and I have scripted ideas I'd love to fulfill over the next handful of years and produce and direct or have a director, we'll see. So I've got ideas and they're coming, not sure when.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it. We'll be looking forward to your second film.
Thank you very much. I am too.
But congratulations again, and thank you everybody for taking part in the Q&A. Thank you to the audience for watching the film. We're wrapping up our festival now. This is the last day, and at 4 o'clock this afternoon, we will be running the live stream audience awards ceremony. I'm sorry, awards ceremony, but the audience choice. Is that going to be announced, Jake, or?
The audience choice will be announced later this week.
Right, because we got to figure that out. We have to tally those. But at 4 p.m., we have our awards ceremony where we're going to announce the winners of the short film competition. And we had 46 films from around the world. So it'll be very exciting. So everybody tune in again at 4 p.m. and see the awards ceremony. Other than that, it's been a fantastic festival. We had to shift to a virtual platform. Thank you, Jake, for handling a lot of that.
No problem.
And making it run so smoothly for us. Thank you, Kevin and Melanie, for joining me today.
Thank you for asking.
I thought it was important that you meet David. I thought it was important you see his film. And David, I wanted you to meet these guys too. So
Thank you very much. It was a treat.
thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.